Hello arty peoples and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. I am your host, Emmy Klein, and we have a really fun show planned for today. I'm very excited. It is going to be image transferring. So this is something that you guys can do no matter what level of where your skills are at. Anyone can do this, even kids can do this. It's really fun, really easy, and I wanted to share this with you today. So if you are interested in doing this process, everything that I have up here and that I'm going to be using today is going to be in our teacher's cart, which if you go to the website jerrysartorama.com, type in today's class code in the search bar, and that is JL272. So if you type that in the search bar, our teacher's cart should come up with everything, and you guys can check it out that way. So let's jump in. Like I said, we're going to be doing image transferring. So this is a really fun way of displaying photos that you've taken on vacation, or if you're a photographer and you do professional photography, this is a really fun way of displaying your work. For me, I also have one over here that I took. This is a church in the town of Orcuvo, where I did my residency in France. So this is a really fun image that I took, and now I can display it like it's a adorable little photography art piece that I have on my wall. Now, the cool thing about the image transfer process is that you can do this with any kind of an acrylic. So any acrylic that you guys have out there, it works absolutely. Whether it's a fluid acrylic, whether it's a heavy body acrylic, soft body, kind of any of those different levels, all of it works. Same thing with your mediums. Now, I actually did want to include this as well. This is a brand new medium to us, and I'm very excited about this. This is our Black Mountain Clear Gloss Medium. So what this is essentially clear acrylic paint. It's an acrylic polymer, and it's quite fluid especially compared to the paints that I'm going to be using today. But this is a really fun way of getting your image transferred onto a panel without having to adjust like the color. Like this was a black and white photo that I put on fluorescent green with a touch of white, which is why you get a little fun mix of the colors kind of shifting here and there. But anywhere where your image is pure white is going to show through whatever you put down. So this being clear, it would then just show the panel through. Since I put the green paint, the green's showing through. Now anything where it's solid black is going to appear solid black. Now the cool thing is that you don't also have to stick with a black and white photo. You can do color photography. Now I happen to have a photo of a bicycle shadow that I took again while I was in France. I thought that the shadows were really fun, as well as the little cobblestone pathway, but I also have it in color. So you can see the two different versions. Both of these will work. Now with this, I would suggest also using a laser printer because you can use inkjet. I've seen inkjet work. The issue with inkjet is that the image tends to bleed a little bit, so you don't get as crisp of lines, or the image tends to get a little blurry, essentially. But it does work, it's not the best. The laser printer will be nice and crisp and chef's kiss. So these are the images I have to work with today, and then I also have some panels. Now I do have two different types of panels here, if I can pick this one up. Sorry. Alright, so I have the DaVinci Pro panels. They are cradled. You can use a flat panel as well. Now I have the raw birch, and then I have the ultra smooth. Excuse me. I prefer the ultra smooth because it's just a nice smooth surface. You can use the textured ones, that's also okay. For this process, because of the amount of paint that I'm going to put down, you're really not going to tell much with the surface texture. Unless it comes to like canvas, and I'll show you that in just a second. With this birch one, this is really fun because if I use the clear onto my birch and then image transfer that way, the raw birch comes through as like your pure whites instead of being like a bright white like the other panel or a color from the acrylic. The birch will show through, which is really lovely. And I do have an example because I've done this several times. This is, oh, that's, yep. Katie was like, flip it around. doing miming over there, and yep, that's upside down. All right, so this is an image of my adorable nieces, and I did do the clear medium to transfer the black and white photo, and then as you can see, it's very, very shiny because I finished it off with resin. Any art resin will work for this process as well, and you will see also later on there could be a little bit of like bumpy ridges just because of the acrylic drying, because it's got paper on top. This eliminates any kind of unwanted texture issue, but the really cool thing is that I also let the resin drip on the side of the wood, so it kind of just deepened it quite a bit, but this is still just the raw wood on the sides, which is really, really cool. So you're gonna really get to see that like lovely wood kind of texture and color. But I also wanted to show you, this is it, canvas. Now this, we actually should probably go to the overhead here so I can show you a little bit more of a close-up. So this is a cow. I transferred the cow with fluid acrylic. So just a really, really, really thin acrylic paint, because that also works. And then I transferred it onto canvas panel. I wanted to show you this specifically because when you transfer it on canvas panel, it worked clearly, but you do see that like little bit of a mini square inside my square, and you can really see it extra because this is gold. I transferred it using gold. And so because of this frame behind it, you can tell where that frame lands on the photo. So this is why I would not actually recommend using a canvas that has been stretched onto stretcher bars, because you will most likely see where those stretcher bars do land. Not that it's not possible, because right here, this is also canvas, but it's a canvas panel. So the fact that it's flat and it's a solid surface and there's no bumps or anything on the back, there was no image issue happening there. But this one I did use just the acrylic paint as well as this. So same thing, just a slight issue that I want you guys to be aware. The other thing that you do want to also be aware of, especially if you're using like the black and white photo, the color of acrylic paint that you use. Now granted, this I did very sloppily. You can tell because I did not take much time in gluing this down, because I knew this was not going to turn out great. The reason why is because my image was probably about this kind of contrast, but my paint that I used was really dark. You can actually see down here, I didn't really get much paint on the corner there, but like the color of the paint is a darker brown. You're gonna have an issue with the darker acrylic paints when you go to transfer your image, because the blacks will appear and then your whites will be whatever color of acrylic paint you put down. If it is super dark, your contrast between your brightest brights and your darkest darks are going to get a lot closer in those values, so your image almost disappears. Now, granted, I could still, now that I've transferred this image on here, I can go over top of this and paint on top of this. I don't have to say this is a finished image or piece of artwork. I can transfer an image down, have it almost go into the background, and then paint something else on top of it if I wanted to kind of just have like a texture or something in the back. It's a really fun way of adding a little something to your painting. But if you are looking to do this for specifically the image that you're trying to transfer, you do want to be aware of the color of the acrylic that you transfer it down. So the darker tones you might want to avoid. Even though purple is very, very lovely, it might be a little too dark for your process. Lilac might be a better option though. Now this is that photo that I used off of the unsplash.com, I believe. It is a royalty-free website. I really loved how the photographer had the motion going on, but it's very static down here. And then I decided to transfer it down with a fluorescent green, which I thought was fabulous. Now, if you are actually not focusing on the image itself and look at the surface texture, you might be able to see a little bit. Actually, you know what? Let's go to that side camera. That way you guys can really get a good view of this. I think you'd probably be able to see it a little bit better. Because I just wanted to show you that surface texture. There it is. You guys can see there's a little bit of like rippling happening throughout the image. And that's just in the surface, and it doesn't actually affect, there you go, you guys can really see it there. It doesn't actually affect the image transferring down. Now, my image is not distorted in any way. It's just an odd surface texture. So that's what I'm saying. If you want to minimize this texture, if that happens to you, just do a layer of resin on top of that, and then that will pretty much disappear because the image itself is nice and crisp and it's perfectly where it needs to be. It just happens to have that surface texture. Again, though, if you are going to be doing anything resin-wise, make sure you guys are safe and do the precautions that it takes to do resin, and please look into that. But let's get into transferring these because I am very excited. So, of course, what you're going to need are photos. I'm going to actually work with my Ultra Smooth Da Vinci panel, the white one. And then I'm going to also use my black and white photo because I want to transfer this down using acrylic paints. So I got my disposable gray paper palette, and I'm going to use, let's do a couple of colors. So I'm going to use the cadmium red medium, the cadmium yellow light, and then the titanium white. Now the cool thing about all the Soho acrylics here is that they are non-toxic, so that is all lovely non-toxic paints. But I'm going to mix up kind of a pink and then like an orangey color. So if there are any questions right now, please pop them in the chats because I have Amanda and Frida moderating those questions for you guys. So if you have any questions about what I've talked about so far, you guys can absolutely ask any of those questions. Now, I did also forget a palette knife. Christina, can I please get a palette knife? I swore I was going to be completely prepared. Whoops. This is why Christina's amazing and the best. So, that might have been a little bit too much red. But I'm going to pop in some. Yeah, that'll work. Perfect. Palette knife. All right. So, the reason why I do want to lighten up my red is because, as all acrylics tend to do, as this dries, it is going to get a little bit darker. So I think the red in its own, like pure straight out of the tube form, might be a little on the dark side. But I want the background of my image here, when I transfer it, I want it to be really bright because I want the bright whites of my image to really pop in contrast to the darker areas. I would probably lighten that just a little bit more.
It's a strong red.
It's a very strong red. Cadmium reds tend to be strong, but granted this is a hue, which means it is not a true cadmium. But it is still a very strong red. Alright, we're going to go with that. Alright. Make sure it's... actually, it doesn't have to be fully mixed. That's the cool thing. Alright, now that, like I said, that might have been a lot more red than I intended. That might really tint down that yellow. Let's see. Ooh. Now what's cool is that if I don't actually mix this all the way, let me actually tilt it so you guys can see. If I don't mix this all the way, those fun colors will actually come in through on the palette or on the painting, which is really fun and something you guys can absolutely experiment with. I highly recommend it. Alright, so I got a nice sort of funky orangey color. Again, I added just a touch of white just to kind of brighten it up just a little bit. And then I have an easy wiper down here somewhere. I know I do. Always have an easy wiper on hand. Just to kind of knock that down. Alright. So, now, I got my two colors. And actually, you know what? Let me pop a little eraser down here so you guys can see that just a little bit better. There we go. Alright, so I got my colors mixed. All I have to do now is applied to my canvas. Now I'm gonna actually remove that image from behind there. So with this right here, it does not really matter where I place the colors. It's just personal preference, honestly. Whether or not you want red in a certain spot or the orange in another spot, you know, you guys can actually use any of the other colors. Now, if you go to, actually, if we go to that side camera, you guys might be able to see just how much paint I'm applying down. Because this is a heavier body acrylic, so it has a lot more like hold to the heavier chunks of color if I lay it down. Like it will maintain its like peaks and stuff. So when it comes to this, I'm not laying down a ton and I'm not giving it a ton of texture, you know? I'm just getting a good layer down. And then I'm gonna try and flatten it down as much as possible. So I do a good layer and then I take my brush and I'm just gently letting it hit the top of it to kind of smooth it out, right? And then I'm gonna take the orange. Let me actually just flip it. Again, if I don't smooth this out, that will stay. But because I'm trying to do an image transfer, I do want this to be pretty smooth. But I have found the more paint that you put down, the more likely you are going to get a full image transfer. Because I have had, if I get really thin with my application, I've gotten kind of almost like that cow, where it's looking a little almost like eroded, I guess is a good way for it. What's a good way of saying that?
It's actually a good way to say
it. Eroded, where it just kind of, it looks like it's just been, yeah, distressed. That's the word I was looking for, actually. So it tends to have more of a distressed kind of look if you get your application really thin. Now, if that's what you're going for, that's great. That is a really, really great look, and you can absolutely do it. Now, since this is nice and wet, and I know that it's going to definitely, it is wet acrylic paint right now, I'm going to very quickly, because I could put this on top of here, but then I'm going to try to line up my image, and it's a lot easier if I just do this. Right about there-ish, right? So I can see my image is slightly oversized, and that's when I printed this, I knew I was going to be working on a 9x12 canvas, right? So you can see just a little extra. So when I printed this image off, I made sure to print my image off at 9.5 by 12.5. Just a little bit extra. The reason why is because if you do exactly the same size as your canvas and you don't line it up perfectly, you are going to see that edge. Now, you're going to see that in just a minute when I go to reveal this image. I'll show, actually, you know what, let's just show you now. But let's go back to that overhead real quick because I did want to also show you this. And it's white on white, so I do apologize. But you can see that there's a little bit of a bubbling happening. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. I don't want to squish out all of my paint, but I do want to take my hand and just make sure that if that's an air bubble, I get it out. But because I just laid it down, if you do have air bubbles, you do kind of tend to want to work from the middle out and push them out because you don't want to be fighting it and you want to move kind of as fast as possible. You have a question?
Would a Baron or a brayer be useful in this situation?
That might be a little bit much. Yes, a Baron or a brayer could help you in getting this to be like really nice and like adhered down to your surface. But you, like I said, you don't want to squish out all of your paint. The more pressure you put down, the more likely you are to move that acrylic back out from underneath your paper. But I think your hand's probably good enough. You know, I use like the palm of my hand here just to kind of smooth it out for the most part. And if I have like weird little like ridges like I do right here, you know, I might take my finger and just push it out just a little bit, kind of work those bubbles out. Now, I will show you in a second a slightly different version. Yes, we have questions though.
Yeah, one or three.
One or three. Hit me with them.
Can you remind us what kind of printer you used?
I use a laser printer. Brand does not matter. You just want to make sure that it is a laser printer. Inkjet, I have seen work, but your image does tend to blur, whereas the laser printer will get you a nice crisp image.
And what kind of paper? Does it matter?
Does not matter. Actually, the cheaper paper tends to work better. So, nothing special.
Did you mirror your image first?
Yes. Oh, thank you for bringing that up, because I totally forgot to say anything. When it comes to printing your image, you do want to mirror your image, because whenever you apply it, and you will actually see in just a second, because I'm going to reveal this image. I have magic camera things happening back over here. But whenever you lay it down, your image gets reversed, right? So if there's any writing, it's going to be backwards if you don't mirror your image. If you, like, say, for instance, do a photo of your nieces, and they very specifically look like your nieces until you flip them, because they're twins. If I flip them around, I'm just like, I can't tell which one's which. So I had to mirror this, otherwise I wouldn't be able to tell which one's which. But yeah. Do we have another question?
Yes. Brian would like to know, when would an artist use transferring in their paintings?
Whenever the mood hits you, really. So like I said, with this one, when I was transferring the picture of the, well, this is a chateau. When I was transferring this down, I figured that this would be absolutely very difficult to see, especially like here. If you guys go back to the main camera, and I hold it up over here, you really can't see what's going on there, right? So if I were to take this, I don't have to say this is a lost panel. I could very easily paint something on top of this. This could just become my background. If I wanted to put a texture, like a really fun filigree, design in the background of a painting, I can do that, and I can do it with acrylic paint, and then I can have, not only my canvas is going to be toned, then I have a really fun texture in the background too. Like I said, it also works with color printers. Like this is a laser printer, but with full color. You don't have to be stuck to just the black and white. Now, if you're a photographer, this is a great way to show your work in a really kind of interesting kind of way. That's why I really loved this. I thought this was a really fantastic way to display someone's photo. Or even just like if you wanted to have like your memories of when I was traveling around, I can display them in my house in a manner that's just more than me printing them off on the printer. It's a fun way of kind of either decorating or using this as a fine art. It's entirely up to you as an artist. So, do we have another question?
Could you use a silicone brush to smooth out once you're, like the paint when you're...
Again, the silicone brush, yes, you can. Like we have, are they called the spatchers, or little big flat ones? Those are great. I've also used like a credit card before. Princeton has the wedges, which would be really easy. I would say you want to make sure that it's a big surface area, because the thinner you get, like if it were like this, you would run the risk of like really kind of getting it squished out in weird places, and then you would see that texture of where you were squishing it through your image, which would give you a surface texture. Now, also don't use a palette knife, because this will scratch.
I think she meant in the original application of the paint.
Oh, in the application of the paint, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever gets the paint down, it's perfect. Now, I'm going to do movie magic here, and voila, it's dry. Ta-da! All right, which is, FYI, I don't remember which way I laid my image down, so I might have reversed the color situation here. It's okay. Now comes the fun manner of getting the paper off, because this is adhered on, right? If you want to, all you have to do is just spritz it on the back. And actually what's really cool is as you spritz it, and if you go to the overhead, you'll see it. It's just really, really fun. As I spritz it with water, the image starts coming out. Now, it's not going to be this fuzzy, I promise. I'm just getting the paper wet, and I'm just getting it, it's not soaking wet. I have actually just full on dipped this in water before. These panels are pretty sturdy. This one I dipped into water because I was like, we're just gonna expedite the process, and it was small enough to do that in my sink. But this, it's not soaking wet, but it is definitely a good amount of water on the surface. I want this to seep into that paper because as I start doing that, my paper is now becoming pulp. But this is only removing the paper pulp. The image is still there. We have a question?
Yes.
Because this is going to take me a minute.
If acrylic paint works well for transfers, can you also use just acrylic gesso or acrylic gel mediums in the same way?
Yeah. Essentially, you just need the acrylic polymer is the thing that really makes it some kind of magic that gets it to stick. What that magic is, I could not actually explain to you. I'm just going to say it's magic, and you are now a wizard. You're welcome. So.
What's the average drying time on the paper sticking to the...
Thank you for asking, because I was going to mention that when it comes to adhering the image down onto your panel, no matter if you're using acrylic paint or a medium or a gesso, whatever it is that you're using, I tend to just let it sit for a day, whole day. So like if I were to come back and do the other one, I would probably remove the paper tomorrow. Now even tomorrow at like noon, because I just want to make sure that that acrylic had a time to dry, and the paper really doesn't like hold in moisture because it's paper. It breathes. The moisture is going to get out of there, not a problem. The issue that and here I'm going to actually tear off the excess now that it's wet, and then I can do this. You do have to kind of watch out for stuff like that, like it's going to peel off. But I will say, if it's peeling off, it's going to do that when you remove the paper pulp anyway. Sorry, I lost my train of thought of what I was saying before that. The dry time, yeah. So for me, I just leave it for a day. I walk away for a day, and I understand, like, as I start this process, it's just going to take a whole day. And I could time it if I was really trying to get this done really, really quickly. And like, you know, if you're trying to hit a deadline for a show, you could absolutely figure out the exact amount of time it takes for your specific acrylics to dry, but every acrylic paint's gonna be different. Now, also with the application of how thick you put the paint down. So, we have another
Will
question?
this technique work with magazine pages?
It might.
That's how they were printed.
That is, yeah, it depends on how they were printed. I feel like it should, because the image that gets stuck down is the printer part that is touching the acrylic polymer, whether it be the acrylic paint or mediums that you're using. Now, it is double-sided, yeah, and it's very thin paper, so it might actually warp more on you. So that might be something that you're gonna wanna pay attention to. But while that's drying, and while these specifically were drying, another really good thing to do is to put weight down onto it. Make sure that it is fully on the whole surface and not just like one little thing right in the middle, because then it was gonna push out your acrylic paints. But something like I put another panel on top of this and then put weight on top of that so it's evenly distributed. That's gonna hold your paper down and keep it kind of from buckling as much as possible. Now, I can do this for the rest of the show. That would be absolutely terrible for you guys, so I don't really want to do that. But I will say, if you look at this right here in the center, it looks pretty good, right? If you really, really look close, like if I'm holding it up like, you know, I'm blind and I can really hold it up close to my face, I can still see little pieces of paper pulp. Once this fully dries, because it's still kind of damp, once this fully dries, it's going to become hazy. So whenever you're doing this, the best thing to do is when you're trying to figure out exactly whether or not you're done, let it fully dry. And if it becomes hazy again, like as you can see, it's actually already starting. And you can really see it in like the dark areas. You can see that pulp. So let it fully dry and then come back and do it again. And you're going to definitely get more paper pulp off of it. Like if I were to really focus right here. Now I will say this paper removal process, the absolute best tool that I've ever found are your hands. I would not recommend using anything else. It's definitely a touch kind of a thing where you need to feel whether or not there's paper pulp. And if you try to use anything like a scraper or a silicone kind of paintbrush or anything like that, like we were talking about like the spatchers, you have that run the risk of like digging back into your acrylic paints. The acrylic paints aren't going to move on you because they're dry, but they will absolutely peel off if you dig at them. Now, if you look at this right here, there's no paper pulp right in that little area. But you can see that color that I painted down, that orange, kind of starts fading back into that like pinky color, which is really fun, and I'm very excited about this. I just know that this is going to take me way too long to remove all the pulp on this, but I will absolutely do that and post the final one of this to our Facebook Live group. Now, I know we have questions.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Number 1, would this be considered mixed media?
Technically, yeah. Yeah, it is mixed media because you're using acrylic, you're using a printer. If you go back on top of this with anything else on top of, you know, your image to kind of like pizzazz it up, or like, you know, markers or whatever it may be.
Technically, it's acrylic and toner.
Yeah. Acrylic and toner, yeah. So, yes, mixed media is what I would say.
And then
Second
number
question?
2, right now, could you re-wet it now, or would you have to let it dry all the way again before you spray it more?
Yeah, you can absolutely keep putting more water on it. For me, the one thing I have noticed when you get down to like this level of paper pulp, the best thing to do is to just barely get it damp. Don't get it soaking wet. Like I just put way too much water on it and I can feel it. For me, I actually usually just spritz my hand, and then that little bit of moisture on my hand helps me get that paper pulp off there, because not only do you need the water to move the pulp, but you also need that friction of your fingertips and your skin pulling it off, if that makes any sense. Now, we have another question?
Yeah, does it ever smear when you like do the image transfer?
No. That's the cool thing about this, is that acrylic kind of solidifies it and like locks it in place, which is really, really cool.
That's one of the reasons that you use the laser with the toner, is because when it goes to the laser printer, it actually heats it up and all the powder of the toner melts into one solid piece. That's what the black ink is like one solid melted piece, and so you're actually separating that from
The paper.
the paper. And even better
Katie
into
with the
paper.
science. This is why we call Katie the Oracle. She knows everything. Now, I will say, I could keep going on this, but I do want to show you as well how to do this with a more fluid medium as well. And so, with this, get all my little paper bits. You are going to get a lot of paper bits happening, so that's definitely going to happen. Now, I also will say my personal preference when it comes to doing this transfer is a more heavy body acrylic. Again, you can use a fluid. This is exactly what I use for this one. I just feel like I use way too much paint when it comes to fluid, because you do need a good amount on there to get a good adhesion. And even with that, like, I got that like kind of distorted, eroded kind of look to my piece, and there was a lot of paint on here. I feel like I'm just burning through it. This kind of holds the paint holds together a little bit better, so it kind of works better to like gel it on. Now this is a little bit more fluid, so this is going to be kind of like if you were to use this is still not even like a fluid acrylic. This is a little bit heavier than that, But, question?
If you're using canvas, do you have to gesso the surface first if it is unprimed?
Can I get another paintbrush? Sorry, I just realized that one's just a wider paintbrush to where I can get it,
Wider acrylic paintbrush.
yeah, a wider acrylic paintbrush. Sorry, what was the question?
If you're using canvas and it's not primed, do you need to gesso the surface first before you do this?
If you're using raw canvas, I would say you don't have to. You could absolutely probably do this even on like just fabric, which might be really, really cool. The medium or even acrylic paint that you put down is going to fuse it and almost like seal your fabric. Just be aware that it's not going to feel like fabric after you're done.
How big are you going?
That works.
Okay.
Perfect. I just realized I did not have 2 paintbrushes up here. So we're just gonna use a 1.5 inch Bestie brush. Love it. But yeah, you should be able to use raw fabric. I don't see why not. Just the only other thing to be kind of aware of when you're using raw fabric is that it's going to soak up everything that you use. So you're probably going to use twice as much medium. So if you were to use like a raw canvas, I would, if you're doing it specifically for like the texture and that look of raw canvas, I would probably size it with like PVA, which is clear, and it's going to keep you from having to use like all of your mediums. So that would probably work a little bit better because...
I'd be careful too if you were doing anything that was a dyed fabric.
Oh yeah, the dye might leach out a little bit. But that would again be one of those things that you could easily
I mean, it could be cool.
test. It could be very cool.
This is gel medium, right?
This is a our brand new clear gloss medium, the Black Mountain. So it's not really a gel, it's kind of really more fluid, which is really, really great, but it's essentially just a clear acrylic paint, which is really, really cool. Definitely a lot thinner than the Soho, but I still got a good amount on there. And I'm going to take my picture and again, just pop it on this way, just to make sure I still have a good amount of image showing all the way around the edges. Now, again, all I'm gonna do, flip it over, make sure, oop, I got a little bloop on there. If you do get acrylic paint or anything on the back of the paper, it's okay. It's still gonna come off because that paper is still gonna separate from that other surface. It just might be a little bit harder to get it off. And it might peel off in one kind of chunk, which is really, really bizarre, but something you just need to be aware of. Now this, the reason why I did this, and let's go to that side camera because I wanted to show you this. Hopefully you guys can see this. All of that really funky texture. It might not be an air bubble. This is actually just the medium interacting with the paper, and it is just really bizarre. As long as I'm pushing it down and making sure that that's not an air bubble, I can smooth that out a little bit, but you're really not gonna have much luck in the way of doing that. Now, does that mean that your image is going to be messed up? No, it's just like the other one where it's gonna have just a little bit of surface texture. And if you do put some, like a thick varnish like resin on top of this, all of that would be completely hidden. But that's the texture that you could possibly get. And that's just, this happens, I think, more with the fluid. I don't really have much of this with the heavier body paints, but I did just wanted to show you that. But it still works really, really well as a transfer. Yes, we have a question?
Yes.
And actually, let's go to that overhead because then I can show you.
After all of the conversation we just had with what to paint, what you can paint on, is there anything you would suggest not using it on? Like any...
Your children. Don't transfer images directly onto a child. Sorry. I mean, just probably not electronics.
I've done
Things.
it on glass. I've
Yeah,
done
you can do it on
metal.
glass. Metal works. The aluminum comp panels would be really, really cool because those are the aluminum, and that
Anything
it would
with
shine
texture,
through.
I think would just be an odd shape.
Yeah, if it were like really textured, like if you got a lot of like, but even that might be cool if you do it in a way that's meant to be degraded.
Christina said cement, and I do agree with that because you would rub your fingers raw trying to
Yeah, no, cement would not be fun because, yeah, again, remember you have to remove the paper pulp and that would be not fun. No, actually, before I keep dipping all of my art things into that puddle of medium, I did want to show you this. All right, so same thing happened with this because it's a fluid medium. It's going to tend to buckle a little bit more on you, but when acrylics do dry, because you saw all that texture that was on the other one, right? When they dry, they do tend to contract. So it kind of flattened itself back out. Like, it's not a whole lot of like texture this way, but you can see it, right? And this was totally not me panicking, making sure that it fully transferred. Yeah, there you go. You guys can see that. Obviously, it comes right off. So if I were to spritz this just like I did the other one and kind of let it soak into the paper, might as well get the whole other half of this. And remember, this is my colored print onto the raw birch panel. Pay attention to your edges because if you do transfer and you don't get it completely up next to the edge, it just shifted on me a little bit. Like I had the extra and it did it anyway. Now the really cool thing though with this, if I see that happening, is this completely trash now? No, I'm gonna frame it and that little edge of the frame is gonna hide it. It works. Gotta have a backup plan. But yeah, so if I start removing the paper pulp, again, the exact same way. Now, for whatever reason, and it might just honestly be the paper that I was using here. It was removing it in like these weird, like little grooves.
sand ripples.
It's bizarre, right? But it's actually just the surface texture that just slightly there, and that paper does come off. So when you see this happening, don't panic. Especially if it's still drying, just let it do its thing. Once it's starting to dry, you just need to let it be. It will sort itself out. Now, again, this is one of those things that as you do this process, the more you do, the more you're gonna understand what it's going to do and exactly how it works. I'm gonna need my little towel here. Now, if I do find that it's a little bit too wet, I will actually take an easy wiper and just kind of get some of that moisture off, because too wet, it just tends to get like really pulpy and you're just squishing it around and it doesn't really come up like you want it to. But that paper pulp does come off. It just takes a little bit extra, right? It's the most bizarre thing ever. Now, the last little thing that I really, really wanted to show you guys is for finishing. So, as you can see, I do have a couple of like little bumps of the glue still kind of there. With that, all I do is take an X-Acto blade and while cutting away from your body, because we gotta be safe here, just straight up and down, run it along the edge. You do not have to put a lot of force into this. Your blade should be sharp, and if it's sharp, it will cut through that. Now, if your blade is dull, please, please, please replace it with a sharpened one, because you want the tool to work for you. You don't want to be cutting towards your body, because that's not a good idea. And then we also want to make sure that we are just very lightly doing this, because it will start digging into the wood of the panel, and you don't want to start shaving your panel. That's not fun. But yeah, it just kind of cleans up the edges just a little bit, And again, remember, you can absolutely put resin on top of this to finish it off, and, you know, get any of those little weird surface bumps or anything out of the way. And plus it gives it a really nice, like, shiny finish, which looks fabulous. This right here, because it's the raw birch, anywhere, oh, I don't have another photo of this, anywhere where it was like pure white is now actually the color of the panel. So it's a raw birch. So just be aware that, like, that's gonna happen. So if you have a bright white, like, highlight on someone's forehead, it's now gonna look like wood. So
Really cool if you do that with the aluminum or something shiny behind it because it reflects through it.
very true. You can absolutely do this with the aluminum, the Alumicomp panels. Those are really, really fun. Questions?
So if you did this in black and white, and you wanted to glaze over it, would you suggest sealing it before you add further coats of paint, or would you be able to go straight into that?
Nope. This is essentially like a layer of acrylic paint. So there's no need to seal this. Even if you finish this after removing all the paper and you love exactly how it looks and you just want to have this because the edges of these panels are really nice too. You don't even have to finish that. It kind of matches and looks like a nice little, like, this is why I love cradled panels. They're already finished and you don't really even have to frame them. You can just hang this straight on your wall. It does not have to be sealed, none of it. It is good to go. Another question?
If you use like a clear medium over the first one, could you do like a double transfer?
Absolutely, and that is so cool. And if you do that, please, please, please post it to our Facebook Live group. I would love to see what you do. Actually, if you do this process at all, anybody out there who does this, please post it to our Jerry's Live Facebook group.
And not done it for the entire thing. They just cut out little different size things
Ooh.
and do the acrylic transfer. Instead of covering the entire canvas over and over again, they just did like one little part. So they just
Little
had, like,
sections.
layers and layers of.
Lots of layered images. That's really fun.
But you would definitely want to use clear.
Well, yeah, because anything that you put down on top of it, like, well, here's the deal. You could use a glaze of a transparent acrylic on top, which would be really, really fun. Or you could take, if you don't have a transparent acrylic, you can take something like this and give your colors a transparency because, again, this is acrylic, like clear acrylic paint, right?
Binder without the.
It's acrylic binder, yeah, without the pigment. So if I were to mix this in with my paints, I would get the same exact color, just more transparent because I have more of that glue, that binder in there. And it's kind of dispersing my pigments to make it a little bit more kind of transparent. That would definitely be the only option to make your acrylic paints more transparent. Do not water them down. Because if you were to water them down instead of using a acrylic medium, you're gonna have adhesion issues. The image is not gonna transfer very well. And then on top of that, like you get a lot of adhesion issues with the paint in general, and that's not gonna work out well. So, any other questions while I am here for questions? Because again, I can do this all day. This is gonna take me a minute. Now I will say, the one thing I have learned with this process is that I probably, personally, would not go larger than a 9x12. The reason why is because you're gonna have to rub all that paper pulp off with your hands, and
Unless you have a lot of friends that want to come help.
yeah, unless you got buddies, like if you would like Huckleberry Finn them and they're like, this is so much fun, oh my gosh, you guys would help me? Like that would be great. But it is a process that after a while it can absolutely start hurting your fingertips and everything. So the larger the piece it is, the bigger amount of paper you're gonna have to remove. But I mean, it would look really, really amazing if you go really, really large. I mean, what is it? FedEx Kinko's, they have the, what is it? It's the printer that's really, really cheap. It's for like, architect
plans, yeah.
Yeah, architecture blueprints, that one. It's a blueprint printer. I got a large, like 18x24 print for like less than $1, I want to say. Granted, don't quote me on that price because I don't work for FedEx Kinko's and it's been a while since I've done that, so they might have changed their pricing. But something like that, you could absolutely print large and then do an image transfer. Just remember, you are going to have to pull off all of that paper pulp and your hands are going to be screaming at you. But it is a really, really fun process that you can get really amazing results with. And there's the possibilities for this, I feel like, are endless, because, you know, I could absolutely take this and then paint on top of it. I can include this into part of a sculpture. I can do all kinds of things with this process, which is really fun. But like I said, make sure if you do this process and you guys try it out, please go post it over on the Jerry's Life Facebook group. But I wanted to make sure to include, if you guys try to do that and you join over on our Facebook group, make sure you answer that security question, because if you do not answer that security question to join the group, you are deemed a robot, and I'm not allowed to let you in. I will be telling you to go answer that question. So that's just the one caveat. But this is where I'm gonna be living for the next 3 days. But as you can see, like, I actually got a good amount of the paper pulp off here in just my general ramblings, and what, it's been like 5 minutes? It doesn't take much, but it's just watch TV while you do it. It's very easy. Question?
Gwyneth would like to know, does the medium stay clear during the rewetting, or will it go a little milky again?
No, it should not go milky. Now, if your acrylic medium goes milky when you get it wet, it's most likely not an acrylic medium, because it should not re-wet. That, I will say, will happen if you use something like Elmer's glue. That is specifically designed to re-wet. That's why it's a children's glue, because it's supposed to be able to, like, get wet again and then break down and wash out of clothing. The other thing I have seen that happen with is, like, Mod Podge. Mod Podge, if it's not specifically like a waterproof version of Mod Podge, it can re-wet as well. That's why I would just suggest using a acrylic medium, which is specifically designed for, like, painting and acrylics, because then you can also mix it in with your paints. But this, I would do this for the entire show. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was the show, guys, and it's a really, really fun process. It's super easy. You can use it with acrylic paints, like our fluorescent paints, which are amazing. I really almost went with that fluorescent pink. I was so tempted, but I've had a lot of fluorescent pink in my life lately, so I figured that would be, it's time to, we had to go with a little green. But the other thing that I really, really loved were those acrylics that had the metallics. This actually, I used all 5 of the metallics, because I had the silver and that iridescent white, and then the gold, copper, and bronze up in the corner. So you can even place your colors in a very specific manner when you do these transfers. It's really, really fun. But the metallics, when you transfer them, just add a little extra pizzazz. I love it. And then you can, again, also use any other acrylic colors. But again, I would suggest a heavier body. But that was the show. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, make sure you join me next week, because I'm going to be doing a watercolor demo. We're actually going to be going over doing a landscape, which is really fun. And I'm very excited about this. But I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much. Bye.